This episode of Behind These Walls highlights the Smithfield Inn, located on the north side of Main Street in downtown Smithfield and built in 1752. It was first known as the William Rand Tavern. Before its current moniker, it was the rectory of the Christ Episcopal Church and the Sykes Inn. Adjacent to the Smithfield Inn is the 1750 courthouse. As the location for local government in colonial Virginia, courthouses and their surrounding complexes, including a clerk's office, jail, and tavern. The latter was vital as courts met infrequently. Court officials and litigants often journeyed long distances, necessitating arrangements for dining and lodging. Taverns and inns were bustling social centers for travelers and locals alike. Residents would meet with travelers here to trade gossip and transact business. Traditionally, these establishments were sparsely furnished, had straw on the floor for dirty boots, and served local spirits and fare. Local foods produced by nearby plantations and farms were served, and depending on the time of year, meals could feature James River oysters, ham from local smokehouses, vegetables from nearby gardens, or breads and cakes from grain ground in a local grist mill. Spirits were distilled from local peaches and apples, or they were purchased from those same nearby plantations and farms. William Rand was commissioned to build a bridge over the head of Pagan Creek in 1747, and in 1750 he was contracted to build the courthouse in Smithfield. Likely foreseeing the needs of the courthouse next door, in 1759 he applied for a license to operate a tavern on this site.
William Rand built the courthouse, and in 1756 he bought this particular building as a house, and then turned it into a tavern. Yes, George Washington slept here, but it was when he was surveying. It wasn't when he was president. And he was in the dismal spot. He would make his maps, take them to the courthouse, have to register them, and then he would go back and take care of the rest of his business.
On October 29, 1768, George Washington's diary documented that he got to Smithfield and then returned to Williamsburg. Rand sought to lessen his involvement with the property in 1766 when, in the Virginia Gazette, he offered to lease this space, describing it as a spacious brick house, upwards of 50 feet in length with 4 rooms below and 3 above, and a good cellar under the same in 3 apartments, together with storehouse and counting house under the same roof and many other convenient houses, etc., adjoining the courthouse in the town of Smithfield. The same is well calculated either for a merchant or tavern keeper. The term shall be easy, and the premises may be entered upon Christmas next. Ownership changed hands a few times, but the tavern continued to function and flourish, even after the relocation of the courthouse in 1800 to a more central location in the county, until 1854 when the vestry of Christ Episcopal Church purchased it. It was during the church's ownership that the second story was added. The church sold the building in 1892, and it passed through various tenants and owners until it was purchased by the Sykes family in 1922 for use as an inn. The Sykes family expanded the building by adding the porch and a long addition to the rear. Other expansions and additions have taken place throughout the 20th century. Today, the building is a 2-story, 5-bay, Georgian-style brick and frame building. It has a standing seam, metal-hipped roof with chimneys piercing the roof at the side elevations. A 1-story full facade porch with 5 bays and Tuscan columns dominates the front. The interior of the building retains its original floor plan with oak flooring and plaster walls. The foyer is still graced by the original staircase, and at the foot of the stairs stands the original parlor.
This is a great sitting area for folks. Every once in a while we'll have somebody with a special party. I had a 10-year anniversary. They got married here and they had their dinner, and she wore her wedding dress while they had dinner. Another little fun thing in the parlor here is if you look up, your eye says you're looking at crown molding. They had a way in the 18th century of tricking your eye, but if you look, it's really 2 flat pieces of board. But the eye says it's crown molded. Mrs. Sykes had the inn from 1923. She sold it in 1968, but most people give her credit for having it for 50 years. She ran a tight ship. Upstairs, 9 o'clock, lights out, no fraternization. How she made it through the 60s, I don't know.
The dining room has a similar footprint to the parlor. Its fireplace and mantel remain unchanged.
And again, this is another 18th century hearth here. Also kind of interesting is these sconces and this chandelier here are hand-painted crystal, and they're from the 20s. Let's go upstairs and look at a couple of the rooms. The old threshold here. Originally, the tavern had 3 rooms upstairs, and currently 2 rooms are being used now, and this was dead-headed because they needed to put restrooms in. So they lost a room, and I think from a structural standpoint, they decided to keep the staircase. Let's go into the Todd room over here. Of course, this is named after Captain Mallory Todd, and this is all original floors. Has a fireplace. At one time, there were 15 rooms up here, and restrooms down the hall. But when they decided to make 5 suites, they took all the rooms and made sitting areas and everything else out of it. And that is original 1752 fireplace. Of course, the gas logs are not. This is the most requested room by far. We'll go over to the Todd suite straight across. Now the Todd suite setup, it's divided off with the sitting area and of course the bedroom.
The basement space has 2 large storage rooms enclosed in frame walls clad in beaded dashboards.
So we're going to go into what was the winter kitchen, now is our wine cellar. And you'll have to step up and the ceiling's a little low. Now what's fun is the hearth here, and they added cement floors in here a little bit later, but this was the original 18th century hearth. But now we house the good quality stuff. Washington was known to eat in winter kitchens, and there's a lot of evidence in Campbell's Tavern in colonial Williamsburg, and he would sit and have his meals with the servants and slaves. He would hear everything that's going on around town, and that's how he'd get his information. I mean, that's the same thing he did in the Revolutionary War with his spy network. He had people sit in the taverns and listen and send them back all the information. Now we're gonna go to the tasting room. Many years ago, there used to be a flower shop down here. The beams, and as you notice, they're kind of squatty and a little bit wider than today, where we have the 2x8s or 2x10s or 2x12s by 2 inches. Try to drive a nail in one of those boards, it's not happening. They're hard as rock. Yeah, the hand hewed and everything else. So we'll have parties down here of 8 people, and we'll do a nice wine tasting with a charcuterie board, and then they'll go up and have dinner later. But you can see the exposed brick.
Outside in the patio dining space is the garden house. Until 1901, this was Smithfield's post office. Back inside the inn, guests can find a plethora of antiques, artwork, and artifacts.
There's a lot of little details here, and that's what makes the experience, is those little details. Nice little sherry set from the 1800s. And then something that's very unique into Virginia is, of course, the oyster plates. And those are becoming quite collectible. This is the William Rand Tavern. This is a picture of William Rand's grandson. And about a year ago, we had another relative of William Rand's come in here, and he was a dead ringer for that gentleman. This is our flag from 1750. If you look at it, it's all hand-stitched linen. It is older than the town. And we were a British colony. And we figure it's appropriate to have George over here too, because he stayed here. He was a British officer at one time. Then he saw the light.
Such a landmark in Smithfield is the inn that in the early 1800s it served as a stagecoach stop between Petersburg and Portsmouth. And since Washington's visit, other notable guests have been welcomed, including John D. Rockefeller Jr., Lily Pons, and Lady Bird Johnson. The menu at the inn has always focused on fresh, local ingredients. Specialties have included ham, fried chicken, and cornbread cakes. During Annie Mae Sykes' ownership, the inn was included in every edition of the Duncan Hines Directory of Fine Eating Establishments. Today, guests are still coming for Moselle Brown's famous biscuits. A dedicated employee of the Smithfield Inn for over 50 years, she was featured in several news and food publications as her yeast and sweet potato ham rolls remain a must-try. So much so that a packaged biscuit mix was created to allow others the opportunity to try her biscuits. Just as it was in the 1700s, the Smithfield Inn remains a landmark adventure in the 18th century hospitality. Listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 2004, it is a community jewel with plenty of colonial details, stories, and mouth-watering treats. It is a special location for locals and guests alike.
This is a treasure. and needs to be maintained here for future generations.